The desert sun beat down mercilessly on forward operating Base Phoenix, casting long shadows across the compound where soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. Among them, Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked with quiet confidence, her combat boots creating small clouds of dust with each step. At 5 feet 4 inches and weighing barely 125 pounds, she looked almost fragile against the backdrop of towering male soldiers and massive military equipment. Sarah had been deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months now, serving as part of an elite Navy SEAL reconnaissance unit. Her small frame often drew skeptical glances from new arrivals who couldn't quite believe that someone so petite could have earned the coveted SEAL trident. What they didn't know was that Sarah had graduated top of her class from basic underwater demolition, SEAL training. A feat accomplished by less than 20% of candidates who even attempted the grueling program. The morning briefing had been routine until General Marcus Hoffman arrived for an inspection tour. Hoffman was old-school military, a decorated veteran who had climbed the ranks through traditional channels during an era when special operations were exclusively male domains. His imposing 6'3" frame and stern demeanor commanded immediate respect from most soldiers, but his views on women in combat roles were well known throughout military circles. As Sarah approached the briefing tent, she could hear Hoffman's booming voice discussing operational readiness with Colonel Davidson, the base commander. The conversation paused as she entered and snapped to attention, offering a crisp salute. "General Hoffman, this is Lieutenant Chen from SEAL Team 7, Colonel Davidson introduced. She's been leading some of our most successful reconnaissance missions in the region." Hoffman's cold gray eyes swept over Sarah dismissively, taking in her slight build and youthful appearance. At 28, Sarah looked even younger, a fact that had worked to her advantage during undercover operations, but often created challenges in military settings where physical presence was equated with capability. "This is what passes for a Navy SEAL these days?" Hoffman asked, his tone dripping with disdain. "When I was coming up, SEALs were warriors who could carry a wounded teammate 50 miles through enemy territory. What can she possibly contribute to a real combat situation?" Sarah maintained her military bearing despite the insult, keeping her expression neutral. She had faced similar attitudes throughout her military career and had learned that actions spoke louder than defensive words. Colonel Davidson shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught between respecting the visiting general and defending one of his most effective operators. "Lieutenant Chen has an exemplary record, sir," Davidson replied carefully. "Her team has successfully completed 12 high-value target reconnaissance missions with 0 casualties and valuable intelligence gathering." Hoffman waved dismissively. "Intelligence gathering? That's secretarial work, dressed up with fancy titles. Real SEALs engage the enemy directly, not hide in bushes taking photographs." The other soldiers in the tent exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah's reputation preceded her throughout the base, and many of these men had personally witnessed her capabilities during training exercises and actual operations. Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, Sarah's team leader, stepped forward with barely contained anger. "Sir, with respect, Lieutenant Chen is one of the most capable operators I've served with in 20 years, Rodriguez said firmly. "She's saved more lives and completed more successful missions than—" "That's enough, Master Chief," Hoffman cut him off sharply. "I don't need lectures about political correctness from field personnel. The standards have clearly been lowered to accommodate social engineering experiments." Sarah felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest but channeled it into cold determination. She had proven herself countless times in the most demanding circumstances imaginable, from the freezing waters of San Diego Bay during Hell Week to the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan, where she had successfully infiltrated Taliban strongholds. Yet here she stood, once again having to justify her presence based solely on her physical appearance. "Permission to speak freely, sir," Sarah requested, her voice steady and respectful. Hoffman regarded her with amusement, as if entertained by the idea of this small woman challenging him. "By all means, Lieutenant, enlighten me about your qualifications." "I graduated BUD.S. with a class ranking of 2nd overall, sir. During my time with SEAL Team 7, I've completed 43 combat missions with a 100% success rate. I hold expert marksman ratings with 7 different weapon systems and am certified in advanced combat medicine, underwater demolitions, and high-altitude operations. 1. Statistics, Hoffman scoffed. Any desk jockey can memorize numbers. What matters is whether you can perform when bullets start flying and lives are on the line. Can you carry a 200-pound teammate to safety? Can you hold your own in hand-to-hand combat against a determined enemy? Can you make the hard decisions that separate real warriors from pretenders? End. The tent fell silent except for the distant sound of helicopters landing and taking off from the flight line. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from her teammates, all of whom knew exactly what she was capable of. They had seen her drag a wounded Marine to safety during a firefight in Helmand Province. They had watched her single-handedly neutralize 3 enemy combatants during a close-quarters battle in a Taliban compound. They knew that her unassuming appearance, concealed reflexes honed by years of intensive training, and a tactical mind that could process complex battlefield situations with remarkable clarity. "I understand your concerns, sir," Sarah replied evenly. "The physical standards for special operations are demanding, and rightfully so. However, I've met and exceeded every requirement placed before me." Hoffman stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over her intimidatingly. "Requirements that were probably adjusted to ensure female participation. Real combat doesn't care about your feelings or your participation trophy. When facing a determined enemy who wants to kill you and everyone you're responsible for protecting, being politically correct won't keep you alive." The general's words stung because they echoed doubts Sarah had battled throughout her career. Every success was attributed to lowered standards, every achievement questioned as tokenism rather than merit. She had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts to prove herself, only to face the same skepticism from officials who had never witnessed her capabilities firsthand. Colonel Davidson attempted to defuse the situation. "General, perhaps we could arrange for Lieutenant Chen to demonstrate some of her specialized skills during tomorrow's training exercise." "Demonstrate?" Hoffman laughed harshly. "What's she going to show me? How to type reports really fast?" "No, Colonel. What we need to demonstrate here is the importance of maintaining real standards instead of this feel-good nonsense that puts everyone at risk." Without warning, Hoffman's boot shot out in a vicious kick aimed at Sarah's ribs. The attack was sudden and unexpected, catching everyone in the tent off guard. The general's steel-toed combat boot connected with her midsection with enough force to send most people crashing to the ground in agony. But Sarah wasn't most people. Years of SEAL training had conditioned her body to absorb punishment that would incapacitate ordinary individuals. More importantly, her mind had been trained to process threats and react with lightning speed even when surprised. As Hoffman's boot struck her ribs, Sarah's body automatically shifted to minimize the impact, while her tactical awareness exploded into hyperfocus. The kick hurt, sending sharp pain through her torso, but she remained upright and alert. More significantly, the unprovoked attack had crossed a line that transformed this from a discussion about military standards into an assault on a fellow service member. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. Her body moving before her conscious mind had fully processed the situation. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision. Her left hand captured Hoffman's extended leg, while her right hand struck a pressure point just below his knee. The technique was simple, efficient, and devastatingly effective. Within 3 seconds of launching his attack, General Hoffman found himself flat on his back with Sarah controlling his leg in a position that could easily result in a broken bone if she applied additional pressure. The transformation was startling. The arrogant general who had been disparaging her capabilities now lay helpless on the floor of the briefing tent, his eyes wide with shock and sudden understanding. Sarah maintained the submission hold with effortless control, applying just enough pressure to demonstrate her complete dominance of the situation without causing permanent injury. "Please," Hoffman gasped, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Let me go. I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Sir," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a new authority that commanded immediate attention from everyone present. "You wanted to know if I could handle myself in combat. You questioned whether I could make hard decisions under pressure. You asked if I could perform when lives were on the line." Hoffman's face had gone pale, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning in the tent. He had trained extensively in martial arts during his military career, but he recognized the skill level of the woman holding him immobilized. This wasn't lucky or accidental. This was the result of years of intensive training by someone who truly understood combat at its most fundamental level. The answer to all your questions is yes, sir, Sarah continued, maintaining the hold while speaking in measured tones. I can carry a wounded teammate to safety because I've done it. I can engage in hand-to-hand combat because I've trained with the best instructors in the world. I can make hard decisions because I've had to make them in situations where failure meant death for my team and the people depending on us. The other soldiers in the tent watched in stunned silence as their assumptions about both the general and Sarah were shattered simultaneously. Master Chief Rodriguez had a slight smile on his face, proud of his teammate but also concerned about the potential consequences of this confrontation. Colonel Davidson looked like he was having a heart attack, clearly imagining his career ending as he tried to figure out how to explain this incident to his superiors. Sarah gradually released the pressure on Hoffman's leg, allowing him to move but maintaining her position of advantage. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to request that you observe our next training exercise. Not to prove myself to you, but so you can see what modern special operations actually involves. The battlefield has evolved, and successful operators need more than just physical strength. Hoffman slowly sat up, rubbing his leg and looking at Sarah with a mixture of respect and embarrassment. His attack had been unprofessional and inappropriate, regardless of his opinions about women in combat roles. More importantly, Sarah's response had demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical awareness and controlled aggression that made elite operators effective. Lieutenant, Hoffman said quietly, his earlier arrogance replaced by grudging acknowledgement. I owe you an apology. My behavior was unacceptable, and you responded with remarkable professionalism under circumstances that would have justified much harsher action. Sarah helped the general to his feet, maintaining military courtesy despite what had just occurred. Thank you, sir. I understand your concerns about maintaining standards. Those standards are what make special operations effective, and I share your commitment to upholding them. The tent remained quiet as everyone processed what they had witnessed. In the span of a few seconds, preconceptions had been shattered, and new respect had been earned. Sarah had proven her capabilities not through boasting or demonstrations, but through calm, controlled action when faced with an actual threat. General Hoffman straightened his uniform and looked around the tent at the assembled soldiers. He could see the respect in their eyes as they looked at Sarah. The same respect they showed for any proven warrior. For the first time, he began to understand that his assumptions about women in special operations might have been based on outdated thinking rather than current reality. Colonel Davidson, Hoffman said formally, I'd like to extend my visit to observe Lieutenant Chen's team during their next training exercise. I believe there's more to learn here than I initially realized. As the briefing continued with a new dynamic, Sarah returned to her position among her teammates. The pain in her ribs reminded her of the general's kick, but it also reminded her of something more important. She had proven once again that true strength came not from size or gender, but from skill, determination, and the courage to stand up when challenged. The desert sun continued to beat down on forward operating base Phoenix, but inside the briefing tent, the temperature had definitely changed. Respect had to be earned in the military, and Sarah had just made a significant deposit in that account. What happened next would depend on whether General Hoffman was willing to acknowledge that his assumptions about women in special operations needed serious reconsideration. The stage was set for a transformation that would impact more than just one base in Afghanistan. Word of this encounter would spread through military channels, carrying with it questions about outdated attitudes and the changing face of modern warfare. Sarah had no idea that her quick response to an unprovoked attack would become a catalyst for broader discussions about women in combat roles. But that was exactly what was beginning to unfold. Dawn broke over the Afghan mountains with a brilliant orange glow that painted the rocky terrain in shades of gold and crimson. Forward operating base Phoenix buzzed with unusual activity as word had spread about the previous day's encounter between General Hoffman and Lieutenant Sarah Chen. Today's training exercise had taken on significance far beyond its original scope. becoming an informal proving ground for debates about women in special operations that had been simmering throughout the military for years. Sarah stood in the equipment shed, methodically checking her gear with the same attention to detail she brought to actual combat missions. Her tactical vest was loaded with precisely arranged magazines, medical supplies, and communication equipment. Her rifle was clean and zeroed, her sidearm secured in its holster with practiced familiarity. Every piece of equipment had been tested and positioned for optimal accessibility during high-stress situations. Master Chief Rodriguez entered the shed, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the concerned expression of a leader who had spent the night considering potential consequences of yesterday's events. At 45, Rodriguez had seen enough military politics to understand that his young lieutenant had potentially placed herself in a precarious position. Regardless of how justified her actions had been, "How are you feeling about today, Chen?" Rodriguez asked, using the informal tone they maintained when away from official duties. "Hoffman's got half the brass from Kabul, flying in to observe this exercise. Word is he's been making calls all night, talking about revolutionary tactics and female operators." Sarah adjusted her equipment harness and smiled grimly. "I'm feeling like we need to run the best damn exercise this base has ever seen, Master Chief. Not because I have anything to prove, but because our team deserves to show what we can do when everything clicks." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Throughout his 20 years of military service, he had learned to distinguish between operators who sought attention and those who simply focused on mission success. Sarah fell squarely into the latter category, which was one reason why her response to General Hoffman's attack had been so controlled and professional. "The scenario today is a high-value target extraction," Rodriguez explained, consulting his tablet. "Simulated Taliban compound with multiple buildings, civilian populations, and unknown hostile numbers. Intelligence suggests the target is being held in the central structure, but we don't know the exact location or security arrangements." This type of mission played directly to Sarah's strengths. Her small stature allowed her to move through tight spaces and confined areas that might challenge larger operators. More importantly, her analytical mind excelled at processing complex tactical situations and identifying creative solutions that others might overlook. The briefing tent had been expanded to accommodate the unusual number of observers gathering to watch the exercise. General Hoffman sat in the front row, flanked by Colonel Davidson and several other high-ranking officers who had arrived during the night. Their presence created an undercurrent of tension that threatened to transform a routine training evolution into something more resembling a public demonstration. Captain Jake Morrison, Sarah's teammate and the designated exercise controller, stood before a detailed map of the training compound. Morrison was a veteran SEAL with 12 years of experience who had initially been skeptical about women joining special operations teams. His opinion had changed after working with Sarah for 6 months and witnessing her performance under actual combat conditions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, addressing both the participating team members and the observers. "Today's scenario simulates the extraction of a high-value intelligence asset from a fortified Taliban compound. The target is believed to be a Western journalist who has been held captive for 3 weeks and possesses critical information about terrorist operations in the region. The exercise compound was located 2 miles from the main base, constructed to replicate the kind of multi-building complex that Special Operations Forces regularly encountered in Afghanistan. Multiple structures surrounded a central courtyard, with narrow alleys and interconnected rooms that created numerous tactical challenges. Role players from other units would serve as both hostile forces and civilian populations, adding layers of complexity that more closely resembled actual operational conditions. Sarah's 4-person team gathered around the planning table as Morrison continued the briefing. Besides herself and Rodriguez, the team included Petty Officer First Class Mike Thompson, a communications specialist and demolitions expert, and Hospital Corpsman Second Class Elena Vasquez, a combat medic whose emergency medicine skills had saved numerous lives during previous deployments. Intelligence indicates approximately 12 to 15 hostile forces with unknown weapon capabilities, Morrison explained. Civilian population estimated at 8 to 12 individuals, including women and children. The compound has been under surveillance for 72 hours, but recent activity suggests the targets may be moved within the next 6 hours. General Hoffman leaned forward in his chair, studying Sarah as she absorbed the briefing information. Yesterday's encounter had forced him to reconsider his assumptions about women in special operations, but intellectual acknowledgement was different from witnessing actual performance under pressure. Today would provide concrete evidence about whether his outdated attitudes needed fundamental revision. Sarah raised her hand. Sir, what's our intelligence on the building layouts and potential escape routes? If the hostiles realize they're under attack, they might attempt to move the target or eliminate him, rather than risk capture. Morrison smiled slightly, appreciating the tactical sophistication of the question. Limited intelligence on internal layouts. Lieutenant, surveillance suggests the target is being held somewhere in the central building, but we don't have floor plans or detailed information about interior arrangements. This uncertainty was realistic, and presented exactly the kind of challenge that separated competent operators from exceptional ones. Successful special operations required the ability to adapt quickly when initial assumptions proved incorrect, and to make critical decisions with incomplete information. The team moved to their planning area, spreading maps and satellite photographs across a folding table. Sarah immediately began analyzing approach routes, identifying potential observation positions, and considering contingency plans for various scenarios. Her teammates contributed their expertise, while she synthesized different perspectives into a coherent operational plan. Thompson, I want you positioned here, Sarah said, pointing to a building that overlooked the compound's eastern approach. You'll have clear lines of sight for communications relay, and can provide overwatch during our insertion. Thompson nodded, studying the terrain through binoculars. As the team's communications specialist, his positioning would be critical for maintaining contact with both the Tactical Operations Center and supporting elements during the mission. Rodriguez and I will conduct the initial reconnaissance and building clearance, Sarah continued. Vasquez, you'll maintain a mobile position here in the alley, where you can respond to either building if we encounter casualties or need emergency medical support. The plan was tactically sound but relatively straightforward, focusing on speed and precision rather than complex maneuvering. Sarah had learned through experience that simple plans executed flawlessly were generally more effective than elaborate schemes that created multiple points of potential failure. General Hoffman watched the planning process with growing interest. Sarah's approach demonstrated thorough tactical thinking without unnecessary complexity. She assigned positions based on each team member's capabilities, while maintaining flexibility to respond to unexpected developments. Most importantly, her demeanor remained calm and confident despite the pressure of performing under scrutiny. The team conducted final equipment checks and communications tests before moving to their insertion point. The exercise would begin with a 2-mile approach march through realistic terrain, followed by surveillance, planning, refinement, and execution of the actual assault. Total time allocation was 4 hours, including after-action review and debriefing. As they moved through the rocky terrain toward the compound, Sarah felt the familiar heightening of awareness that accompanied actual operations. Her senses sharpened, processing sounds and visual information that might indicate threats or opportunities. Behind her, she could hear the measured breathing and careful footsteps of her teammates as they maintained tactical spacing and appropriate noise discipline. The observation position overlooked the compound from a ridgeline approximately 400 meters away. Sarah studied the target through her scope, noting the positions of role players representing both hostile forces and civilian populations. The exercise had been designed to present realistic challenges, including the need to distinguish between legitimate targets and innocent bystanders. I count 3 probable hostiles in the courtyard, Sarah whispered into her radio. 2 more in the second-story window of the eastern building. Civilian population appears to be mostly in the northern structure. Rodriguez adjusted his position to get a better view of the central building where the target was supposedly being held. Movement in the target building. Looks like 2 individuals, but I can't confirm whether one of them is our objective. This uncertainty was exactly what made special operations challenging. Perfect intelligence was rare in actual combat situations, and successful operators had to balance the need for decisive action with the risk of engaging the wrong targets or causing unacceptable civilian casualties. Sarah spent 20 minutes conducting detailed surveillance, building a mental map of the compound's layout and the movement patterns of everyone inside. She identified potential entry points, escape routes, and positions where her team could move without being observed by hostile forces. "Thompson, can you get eyes on the rear entrance of the target building?" she asked, through her communication system. "Affirmative. 2 guards at the back door, but they're not maintaining consistent vigilance. I see an opportunity for approach through the western alley." The plan that emerged from their reconnaissance was elegant in its simplicity. Sarah and Rodriguez would approach through the western alley, neutralize the rear guards quietly, and infiltrate the target building, while Thompson provided overwatch, and Vasquez remained positioned to respond to emergencies. General Hoffman observed the exercise through monitors in the Tactical Operations Center, where cameras and radio intercepts allowed complete visibility of the team's performance. What impressed him most was Sarah's methodical approach to problem-solving and her ability to process complex information quickly while maintaining clear communication with her teammates. The assault phase began with Sarah and Rodriguez moving through shadows along the compound's perimeter. Their movements were smooth and coordinated, demonstrating the kind of tactical partnership that developed between operators who had worked together extensively under actual combat conditions. Sarah reached the rear entrance first, immediately recognizing that the role-player guards were positioned in a way that would require precise timing to neutralize simultaneously. She signaled to Rodriguez, and they moved together with practiced coordination. Within seconds, both guards had been eliminated through simulated hand-to-hand combat, with Sarah demonstrating the same efficient techniques she had used on General Hoffman the previous day. The role players acknowledged their elimination and withdrew from the exercise area, allowing the team to proceed with building clearance. The interior of the target building presented multiple rooms connected by narrow hallways, exactly the kind of environment where Sarah's small stature became a tactical advantage. She could move through doorways and around corners with minimal exposure, while her enhanced situational awareness allowed her to process threats quickly in confined spaces. "Room 1 clear," she whispered into her radio as she and Rodriguez systematically worked their way through the building. Moving to Room 2, each room presented new challenges as role players representing hostile forces attempted to prevent the team from reaching their objective. Sarah's responses were swift and decisive, using her weapons training and hand-to-hand combat skills to neutralize threats while avoiding simulated civilian casualties. In the 4th room, they found their target, a role player representing the captured journalist who had been positioned to simulate various injuries and stress conditions. Sarah immediately shifted into her emergency medical training, conducting a rapid assessment of the simulated casualty's condition, while Rodriguez secured the area. "Target acquired and secured," Sarah reported. Simulated injuries include dehydration, minor trauma, and possible infection. Vasquez, we're going to need immediate medical evaluation and treatment. The extraction phase required carrying the simulated casualty through the same route they had used for insertion, but now with the added challenge of managing someone who couldn't move independently. Sarah and Rodriguez took turns carrying the role player while maintaining security and navigation responsibilities. Throughout the exercise, General Hoffman found himself increasingly impressed by Sarah's performance. Her tactical decisions were sound, her execution was precise, and her leadership style brought out the best capabilities of her teammates. Most importantly, she demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptability and decision-making ability that made special operations effective. The exercise concluded with the successful extraction of the target and the team's return to base without casualties. The total elapsed time was 2 hours and 37 minutes, well within acceptable parameters for this type of mission. During the after-action review, Sarah demonstrated another crucial leadership quality: the ability to analyze performance objectively and identify areas for improvement. She discussed several moments where different decisions might have produced better outcomes and solicited feedback from her teammates about their own observations. The approach phase went smoothly, but I think we could have gathered more intelligence about the interior layout before committing to the assault, Sarah observed. "Thompson, what did you see from your position that might have helped us plan better?" This kind of self-critical analysis impressed the observing officers as much as the successful mission execution had. Special operations required continuous learning and improvement, and operators who couldn't honestly evaluate their own performance were limited in their potential for growth. General Hoffman stood slowly as the debriefing concluded, looking around the room at the assembled observers before fixing his attention on Sarah. The events of the past 24 hours had fundamentally challenged his assumptions about women in special operations, forcing him to confront the possibility that his attitudes were based more on tradition than reality. "Lieutenant Chen," Hoffman said formally, his voice carrying a note of respect that had been absent during their previous encounter. "Outstanding performance today. You've given me and everyone else here a great deal to think about regarding the future of special operations." Sarah stood and rendered a crisp salute, maintaining professional decorum despite the personal satisfaction she felt at having successfully demonstrated her capabilities. "Thank you, sir. I'm proud to serve with this team and grateful for the opportunity to show what we can accomplish together." As the observers filed out of the debriefing room, Master Chief Rodriguez caught Sarah's attention with a slight nod toward the door. Outside, the Afghan sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold. "How do you think that went?" Rodriguez asked, as they walked toward the dining facility. Sarah considered the question carefully. The exercise had gone well, but more importantly, she had managed to change at least one person's perspective about women in special operations. Whether that change would have broader implications remained to be seen. "I think," Sarah replied thoughtfully, "that sometimes the best way to answer questions is to let your actions do the talking. We did good work today, Master Chief. The team performed exactly the way I knew they would. We did good work. We did good work today, Master Chief." Rodriguez smiled, recognizing the quiet confidence that had made Sarah such an effective leader despite the challenges she faced because of her gender. Today had been about more than just a training exercise. It had been about proving that excellence in special operations came from skill, determination, and teamwork, rather than conformity to outdated stereotypes. As they entered the dining facility, Sarah noticed that conversations seemed to pause briefly as other soldiers acknowledged her presence. Word of both yesterday's encounter and today's performance had spread throughout the base, creating a new dynamic that she would need to navigate carefully. Change in military culture happened slowly, but today had marked a significant step forward. The question now was whether General Hoffman would use his influence to advocate for broader acceptance of women in special operations, or whether today's lessons would remain confined to one small base in Afghanistan. 3 weeks had passed since the training exercise that changed General Hoffman's perspective on women in special operations. The Afghan landscape remained as harsh and unforgiving as ever, but something fundamental had shifted within the command structure of Forward Operating Base Phoenix. Word of Lieutenant Sarah Chen's performance had traveled through military channels with the speed that only truly exceptional demonstrations could achieve. Sarah found herself in an unexpected position. Rather than being the outsider constantly proving herself, she had become something of a symbol for debates about women in combat roles taking place in Pentagon conference rooms thousands of miles away. The attention was uncomfortable and unwanted, but it came with opportunities to influence policies that would affect future generations of female service members. General Hoffman had remained at the base far longer than originally planned, conducting what he called comprehensive evaluation of current special operations capabilities. In reality, he was undergoing his own transformation, trying to reconcile decades of military experience with new understanding about what made operators effective in modern warfare. The morning briefing on March 15th carried an urgency that immediately captured everyone's attention. Colonel Davidson stood before a map marked with fresh intelligence reports, his expression grim as he addressed the assembled special operations teams. "Intelligence sources have confirmed the location of Hassan al-Rashid, a high-value target who has been coordinating Taliban operations throughout this region for the past 18 months, Davidson announced. Al-Rashid is responsible for at least 12 improvised explosive device attacks that have killed or wounded over 40 coalition personnel. Sarah studied the reconnaissance photographs that accompanied the briefing. The target was located in a remote compound, nestled in a mountain valley approximately 15 kilometers from the base. The terrain was challenging, with steep approaches and limited options for helicopter insertion or extraction. The compound is heavily fortified with an estimated 20 to 30 hostile forces, Davidson continued. More significantly, intelligence suggests al-Rashid is planning to relocate within the next 48 hours. This may be our only opportunity to capture or eliminate him before he disappears into the tribal areas where he'll be effectively untouchable. General Hoffman leaned forward in his chair, studying the tactical challenges presented by the mission. The compound's location made conventional assault extremely difficult, while the time constraints eliminated options for extended surveillance and detailed planning. This was exactly the kind of high-risk, high-reward operation that tested the limits of special operations capabilities. Lieutenant Chen, Colonel Davidson said, directing his attention to Sarah. Your team has the most experience with this type of terrain and target set. What's your assessment of the tactical situation? Sarah stood and approached the map, analyzing the intelligence reports with the methodical approach that had become her trademark. The compound was positioned to take advantage of natural defensive features, with steep approaches that would expose attacking forces to observation and fire from elevated positions. Sir, conventional approach routes are heavily disadvantaged, Sarah observed. However, there appears to be a drainage system running along the northern slope that might provide concealed access to within 50 meters of the target building. The approach would require technical climbing skills and absolute noise discipline. Master Chief Rodriguez nodded approvingly. During their time together, he had learned to trust Sarah's ability to identify unconventional solutions to complex tactical problems. Her suggestion was exactly the kind of creative thinking that often made the difference between mission success and failure. The drainage approach would require a small team, Sarah continued. 4 operators, maximum, moving during pre-dawn darkness to reach assault position by sunrise. Supporting elements could provide overwatch and emergency extraction capability from positions on the surrounding ridgelines. General Hoffman studied the proposed route through binoculars, noting the technical challenges involved in moving through rocky terrain in complete darkness while carrying full combat loads. The plan required exceptional physical conditioning and navigation skills, exactly the capabilities he had questioned during their first encounter. Lieutenant, that approach route would be extremely demanding even for experienced mountaineers, Hoffman observed. Are you confident your team can navigate it successfully while maintaining the element of surprise? Sarah met his gaze steadily, recognizing the question behind the question. Hoffman wasn't doubting her tactical analysis. He was asking whether she truly believed her team could execute a plan that left no margin for error. Sir, I'm confident we can reach the target and complete the mission, Sarah replied. More importantly, I believe this approach gives us the best chance of capturing Al-Rashid alive, which would provide significant intelligence value for future operations. The discussion continued for another hour as various options were evaluated and refined. Sarah's proposed route gradually emerged as the most viable approach despite its technical demands. More significantly, her calm confidence and detailed tactical knowledge had convinced even skeptical observers that she was the right person to lead the mission. Very well, Colonel Davidson decided. Lieutenant Chen, your team has mission command for the Al-Rashid operation. You'll have helicopter support for insertion and extraction, plus 2 additional sniper teams for overwatch. Mission execution tomorrow night. As the briefing concluded, General Hoffman approached Sarah with an expression that mixed respect and concern. The transformation in his attitude had been remarkable, but he still worried about placing such demanding responsibilities on someone he had dismissed as unqualified just 3 weeks earlier. Lieutenant, I want you to know that I have complete confidence in your abilities, Hoffman said quietly. Yesterday I questioned whether you belonged in special operations. Today I'm asking you to lead one of the most important missions we've conducted this year. Sarah appreciated the general's honesty and the courage it took for him to acknowledge his previous mistakes. Military culture didn't always reward leaders who admitted error, but Hoffman had demonstrated genuine willingness to grow and change. Thank you, sir, Sarah replied. I won't let you down. The next 24 hours were spent in intensive preparation. Sarah's team conducted detailed rehearsals using terrain similar to their target area, practicing the technical climbing and navigation skills that would be essential for mission success. They studied satellite imagery, memorized building layouts, and coordinated with supporting elements to ensure everyone understood their roles. Thompson worked with communications specialists to ensure reliable radio contact throughout the operation. despite the mountainous terrain that often interfered with standard equipment. Vasquez prepared medical supplies for various casualty scenarios, including provisions for treating wounded prisoners who might require immediate attention. Rodriguez spent hours going over contingency plans with Sarah, exploring various scenarios that might require rapid adaptation during the mission. Their experience working together had taught them both the importance of thorough preparation combined with flexibility when circumstances changed unexpectedly. Remember, the primary objective is capturing al-Rashid alive, Rodriguez emphasized as they conducted final preparations. But if that becomes impossible, eliminating him is still a significant victory. Don't let perfect become the enemy of good. The helicopter insertion took place at 0200 hours, with Sarah's team being dropped at a landing zone 3 kilometers from the target compound. The flight had been smooth despite challenging wind conditions, and the pilots had demonstrated remarkable skill in navigating mountain terrain during complete darkness. Moving through the rocky landscape required every bit of Sarah's technical climbing experience and navigation training. The drainage system she had identified provided concealment, but presented constant challenges as the team maneuvered around boulders, through narrow passages, and over steep terrain that would have been difficult even in daylight. Sarah led the movement, using night vision equipment to identify safe routes, while maintaining constant awareness of noise discipline. Behind her, Thompson, Rodriguez, and Vasquez followed in tactical formation, each operator responsible for specific sectors of observation and security. The approach took 4 hours of careful movement before they reached the position Sarah had identified during planning. From their concealed location, they had clear observation of the target compound and could see the defensive positions that had been established around the central building. Overwatch teams. This is Alpha, Sarah whispered into her radio. We're in position and beginning final reconnaissance. Stand by for assault coordination. The compound showed more activity than expected, with several hostile forces moving between buildings and maintaining what appeared to be heightened security. Intelligence had been accurate about al-Rashid's presence, but the increased alertness suggested that their target might be aware of potential threats. Sarah spent 30 minutes conducting detailed surveillance, identifying entry points, guard positions, and potential complications that hadn't been apparent in the initial intelligence reports. The central building where al-Rashid was located had been reinforced since the photographs were taken, creating additional tactical challenges. Rodriguez, I count at least 6 additional hostiles beyond our initial estimates, Sarah observed quietly. They're maintaining active patrols and seem more alert than we anticipated. Rodriguez studied the compound through his scope, noting the same patterns Sarah had identified. The increased security made their mission significantly more challenging but didn't fundamentally change their tactical approach. We stick with the plan, Rodriguez decided. Additional hostiles just means we need to move faster once we initiate contact. Sarah nodded, checking her equipment one final time before beginning the final approach to the compound. Everything depended on reaching the central building before hostile forces could organize an effective response or attempt to move al-Rashid to a more secure location. The assault began with Sarah moving through shadows along the compound's perimeter, using the same stealth techniques that had been so effective during training exercises. Her small stature allowed her to move through tight spaces between buildings while avoiding detection by roving patrols. Within minutes, she had eliminated 2 guards and created an entry point into the central building. Rodriguez followed her lead, securing their route, while Thompson and Vasquez established overwatch positions that covered potential escape routes. The interior of the building was more complex than anticipated, with multiple rooms connected by narrow hallways that created numerous opportunities for ambush. Sarah moved systematically through each space, using her weapons training and tactical awareness to neutralize threats while searching for their primary target. In the third room, she found what they had come for. Hassan al-Rashid was seated at a desk covered with maps and communications equipment, apparently coordinating operations even at this early hour. His surprise at seeing an American Special Operations soldier was quickly replaced by recognition of the tactical situation. Hassan al-Rashid, Sarah announced in Arabic, her weapon trained on the high-value target. You're under arrest. Do not move. Al-Rashid's hand moved toward a weapon on the desk, but Sarah's reflexes were faster. Her non-lethal takedown technique left him unconscious but uninjured. Exactly the outcome required for intelligence exploitation. Target secured, Sarah reported through her radio. Beginning extraction in 2 minutes. The withdrawal from the compound required the same careful movement and tactical awareness that had made the insertion successful. Sarah and Rodriguez alternated between carrying the unconscious prisoner and providing security as they retraced their route through the drainage system. The extraction helicopter arrived precisely on schedule, guided by infrared strobes that were invisible to anyone without night vision equipment. Within minutes, Sarah's team was airborne with their prisoner, flying back toward Forward Operating Base Phoenix as sunrise painted the Afghan mountains in brilliant shades of gold and red. The successful capture of Hassan al-Rashid represented a significant intelligence victory for coalition forces. Over the following weeks, information gained from his interrogation led to the disruption of multiple terrorist operations and the capture of several other high-value targets. More importantly for Sarah's career, the mission had been observed and documented by General Hoffman, who used it as a case study in special operations effectiveness when he returned to Pentagon briefings. His advocacy for women in special operations carried significant weight because of his previous skepticism and his direct observation of exceptional performance. 6 months later, Sarah received orders to transfer to a new assignment at Special Operations Command Headquarters, where she would help develop training programs and policies for the next generation of special operations personnel. The position was a significant career advancement that placed her in a position to influence how women would be integrated into elite military units. General Hoffman personally delivered the orders during a ceremony that recognized her outstanding service in Afghanistan. As he handed her the transfer documents, he spoke quietly, so only she could hear. "Lieutenant, 3 years ago I would have said you had no business in special operations," Hoffman admitted. "Today I can't imagine how we could accomplish our mission without operators like you. Thank you for teaching an old soldier that excellence comes in many forms." Sarah accepted the orders with the same quiet professionalism that had characterized her entire military career. She had never set out to prove points about women in combat or to challenge military traditions. Her goal had always been simple: to serve her country effectively and to earn the respect of her teammates through competent performance. "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied. "It's been an honor to serve with the finest soldiers in the world." As the ceremony concluded, Sarah looked around at the faces of her teammates and colleagues who had gathered to wish her well. Master Chief Rodriguez stood nearby with his characteristic proud smile. Thompson and Vasquez flanked him in their dress uniforms, and dozens of other soldiers who had worked with her over the past year filled the room. The respect in their eyes told her everything she needed to know about what she had accomplished. She had proven that special operations effectiveness came from skill, determination, and teamwork, rather than conformity to outdated stereotypes. More importantly, she had opened doors for future generations of women who would serve in roles that had previously been closed to them. Years later, when military historians studied the integration of women into special operations, they would point to that day in the Afghan desert, when a small woman responded to an unprovoked attack with controlled professionalism and exceptional skill. What they might not capture in their analyses was the quiet satisfaction Sarah felt knowing that she had served with honor and had helped expand opportunities for those who would follow in her path. The desert sun continued to shine over Forward Operating Base Phoenix. But the conversation about women in special operations had fundamentally changed. Excellence, as Sarah had demonstrated, was not limited by physical stature or gender. It was defined by the courage to face challenges, the skill to overcome them, and the wisdom to know when actions spoke louder than words. Sarah's story became part of military lore. Not because she had sought attention or recognition, but because she had quietly and effectively proven that the best operators were those who could perform when it mattered most. The general who had once kicked her ribs in contempt had learned to respect her capabilities, and that transformation rippled through military culture in ways that would benefit countless others. In the end, the most important lesson was simple. True strength could not be measured by size or gender, but by the courage to stand up when challenged, and the skill to back up that courage with competent action. Sarah had demonstrated both, and in doing so, she had changed not only one general's mind, but the trajectory of military history itself.